All right. Welcome everyone to the second GROM's Rust stream. If this is your first time you're checking us out, we are the GROM's NFT project. My name is Adam Del Sol. We are a NFT project and community on the Solana blockchain, and we are learning Rust together. The goal of this stream is for you to learn Rust, even if you're a brand new programmer. Um, so I've got a lot of links in the chat you can check out. If you're learning Rust, join our Discord. And these streams are recorded and put on YouTube. So if you miss out on the stream, you can go back and watch them again. And then as you're working through and learning Rust, you can ask questions in the Discord, the GROM's Discord that I have an invite in the chat for. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll have a chat in the description, or excuse me, an invite in the description. We're just gonna get into this. We're gonna learn about cargo today, and I think we're gonna probably start um, our first program, depending on how it goes, on how questions go and how many questions we have and how long it takes to do this. So yeah, let's just get started. So what cargo is? It's an important tool that you use as a Rust developer. One of the cool things that I really like about Rust is that the people that made the language and the tooling, had a lot of experience with previous programming languages and learned from the good things and the bad things and incorporated that into all the tooling to make Rust a really nice language and tool set to work with. So a big part of that is cargo. So one thing we want to understand about how cargo, what cargo is that it's separate from the Rust compiler, right? Um, so if we go to oh man, I don't know how long I've been muted. Um, I think I might have muted myself while I was talking. Um, so I'm just going to kind of recap here real quick. So Cargo is a tooling for Rust. We use Cargo for compiling Rust programs instead of the Rust compiler. It just makes our lives easier. Just a bit of recap from the last stream. So one way that we can compile Rust programs is to run the Rust compiler command on our file. So all I'm typing in here is rustc. If you've installed Rust, you'll have this available to you. And then we're not going to see anything. It's just, if there was an error, we'd see that here, but there's not. What it has created is a file that has actually been here already. We can see it's up here. So let me just remove that to remove any confusion. Now, if you look, it's just the main.rs file. So we're just going to go rustc main.rs. Again, this is a Rust compiler. This is not Cargo. So this Rust compiler is in this sense, a single application that we're using, right? All right, so it's done. We didn't get any errors. And the main.rs is just our Rust program. And now we have this application here called main, our executable file, if you will. And so with main, we can now run a program. If you've worked with if you've worked with other programming languages, you may not have had to compile. You may have just ran the program. Rust is a two-step process. You compile the program, and then you run the executable file. And so this output we're seeing is just from this main.rs file that I wrote in another video. So it's not anything special. Similar to Hello World, we just have some other words in here, okay? Just wanted to show you that so you could get an idea. All right, so now that we have an idea of rustc, aka Rust compiler, that's what it's short for, we know how to use it, right? Well, we may find ourselves in a situation. I'm not actually going to write these out, but we may have ourselves in a situation where we have lib.rs, right? And so now we look here, and let me just remove main so we can have just our Rust files, right? These are just our text files, our Rust code in them. Well, now, if we want to compile this, I'm honestly not even sure if this is how you would do it, right? You may do something like this. All right. It's starting to get a little complicated. But you can imagine as your program grows, it's going to be more difficult to just type in Rust C here and all this, whatever, all the files you need. And on top of that, when you write most applications, whether it's in Rust or JavaScript or Python, whatever language, we have more than one file, right? Most of the time. And we also have what we call dependencies. And dependencies are typically like code that we're getting from somewhere else, right? If you're familiar with Node Package Manager or, something, I think, what does Ruby have? Gems, right? That's a Ruby programming language, has gems. What you're doing is getting code that has been written or has been written by other people or yourself to take care of some things that you don't want to rewrite every time you write a program, right? So, a big theme here is Solana blockchain development. That's what a lot of us are working towards. But an example is that if you're going to work on the Solana blockchain development, you're going to need to pull in some libraries from the Solana Labs team has created, and other things like maybe Anchor from Project Serum, just so you don't have to rewrite a bunch of stuff. So once we start bringing all these things in, this Rust C, this Rust C command starts to kind of become insufficient, right? If we're just working with more files. So, well, what do we do, right? We don't want to reinvent the wheel, so we use what's included with Rust, and that's called cargo. So cargo is a command application, or application, if you will, that usually comes when you install Rust. If you've installed Rust using the instructions from the Rust book or from the Rust website, you're going to have installed cargo along with it. And I think most, that's just the Rust website here in case you want to, go there and get installation instructions. You'll want to have done that, prior to this video. If you're watching the video, if you're on the stream, just follow along now, and then you can go check out the video on our YouTube channel later. I usually upload these within a day. We just had our first one out today. So, cargo, it's really a suite of tools. It's going to help you with a lot of things, but we're really just going to kind of do a test drive with it, if you will, so we can kind of understand how we use cargo as a new Rust programmer. So let's say we want to write, I don't know, let's say we want to write a new game, right? Let's say we want to write a GROM game. So we're going to say cargo new. We're just writing this in, right? And above the directory we want to go in, and it'll create a directory for us. So we're going to write cargo new, and then the name of our game, and I'm going to call it GROM game. By the way, if there's any questions, feel free to bring them up in the chat, and I will answer them as best I can. So GROM game is what we're going to call it, right? All right, so we have this GROM game package, right? Let's go through this. What it says right here. It says created binary application GROM game package. All right. So that output may be different if we use cargo in different ways. But for what we're doing, we're just going to stick with this kind of this generic workflow for making applications. There'll be times where you want to write a Rust library instead of a binary application, and we'll talk about the differences in that. But for now, we're just going to look at what Cargo has created for us with this binary application. Let me just clear my screen so we can get a little real estate here back, and let's list out our contents of our directory. All right, we did a ls to list the files in GROM game. So we have two things here. I'm going to make this just a little bigger. All right, just so you guys make sure you guys can read it. Let me know if it's if you have any feedback on what it looks like, please. And also, if you have questions, please ask them. Don't be shy in the chat. All right. So when we created our new application with Cargo, we got a couple things here, right? We have this cargo.toml file. You'll frequently hear it referred to as cargo.toml. That's probably the way I'll say it for the most part. We won't go into what this specifically means. This TOML, I think it stands for Tom's markup language or something like Tom's obvious markup language, something like that. But the acronym's not important. We'll look at this file and talk about what's in it in a moment. But I just want to look at the rest of what we got from Cargo, what it created for us. So it also created this source folder, src. We're going to go into that source folder, and then we're going to list the contents of that source folder. And so for now, we just have this main.rs. And just remember, I'm going to open this file using Vim in a moment. Feel free to use Visual Studio Code when you're doing this on your home computer. Or whatever IDE you prefer. I wouldn't recommend Vim if you're a new programmer. I'm just here on the command line. But this main.rs file, I have not opened it, okay? Cargo, when I ran that cargo space new space GROM game, it's created all this. It created that file, that cargo.toml file. It created the source folder that we're in, and it created that main.rs file. So when we look at it, just remember, I didn't write any of this. Cargo wrote everything for us. So we don't have a lot here, right? It's just if you watched our last stream or video before this, we walked through what these words mean and what these symbols mean. But this is a boilerplate hello world function, and it's a very simple function. We know what it does. It's just going to print out hello world, okay? And I think if you're not familiar with Rust, you can probably still figure that out from looking at the syntax. If not, it's okay. So I'm going to exit out of Vim. I just wanted you to see that this is a very simple program, and that the important thing is that you realize that Cargo wrote this code, not me. So if you run cargo run and you name your game or rename your application or game or whatever, cargo run, Twitch watch or whatever, you're going to still get that same main.rs file that says function main, print line, hello world. You'll get the same thing, okay? So let's go back. We're going to go back. When I do the cd space ... that just means I'm going up a directory. It means I'm going from the source folder back into GROM game, okay? And let's do a ls just to look at our contents again. List our contents, and there we have it. All right, we have our cargo.toml file, and we have that source folder we were just in. So let's look at the cargo.toml file, okay? Again, I encourage you to use Visual Studio Code. If you want help on installing that, come into the GROM's Discord. I have some links in there to help you in the beginner geek curriculum channel. And if you have questions, I can probably help you with Visual Studio Code, or somebody from our community can help you with Visual Studio Code installation. And of course, you can always Google about that. So we're going to look at cargo.toml. All right, so this file is a little different, right? It doesn't have we don't have what we normally see with Rust, right? We have this, these braces, equal signs, and quotation marks. We don't have any curly brackets. We don't have a FN, main, or anything like that. And just so you know, my editor that I'm using, Vim, these tildes down here just means that that's not a line, right? It just means that this is the end of the file. Now see that I've created some blank space here. It has removed those tildes for those lines, but now we know that this file stops at the end of this line. Excuse me, I hope that wasn't too loud. Okay, so what are we looking at? So what Cargo has done, it has created some, what we like to call is like boilerplate, right? It's just a file that has some standard information in it. Over time, you may have reasons to come in and change this. In fact, very soon, as we look at the next section, the programming and guessing game, we will, in fact, be making changes in this file. Give me just a moment here, please. Thank you. Just clearing my throat. So yeah, you'll soon have opportunities to interact with this file. Um, Today we won't mess with it too much. I just want to kind of give you a tour of it. So this and as your another thing to mention, as your programs grow, if you look at other Rust programs, you'll see that these cargo toml files get, there's more things in them, more sections, more entries, all that stuff. Um, so and then part of this boilerplate is that it has this link to um, some reference documentation for Rust. So that's cool. If you want to like dig in more, you have this right here to go look at. So this section package, what this means is like this is information for the specific like application that we have created using Cargo. It's populated this for us. Again, I didn't write any of this. When I ran Cargo new GROM game, it built all this for us. So it gave it the name GROM game, which is the same name I put in the command line when I ran Cargo. It gives this default starter version, which, as your program or application changes, you'll want to change the version to know, like, which version you're working with. And this edition actually refers to the version of Rust. And so 2021 is the latest edition of Rust. And I don't know, I'll check on the book a little bit later to see if we want to go into like the different editions. But just know that 2021 is relatively new. And if you see an edition of 2021 Rust, you're kind of supported, like whatever Rust you write is compatible with other editions of other Rusts that are edition 2021. It's like a range of versions, Rust versions. I think it's an easy way to describe it. So beyond that, we have this section called Dependencies. And I think if you remember earlier in this stream, we talked about bringing in code from other places. If you're a JavaScript developer, you're familiar with like node packages, npm, the node package manager, and package lock file, package JSON file. If you're a Ruby developer, you're familiar with like gems. I don't remember much about that. But in Rust, what we call packages are generally crates, okay? So if you go to, let me just type a website in our chat. I believe I'm doing this from memory. I believe it's crates.io. All right, sorry. Oh, neat. I didn't realize I could do that. Cool. I can give you crates.io. I should make sure that that's the right one. I'm pretty sure it is. It's essentially an online directory of all the different Rust packages. Yes, it is, that you can pull in. So what will happen here as you write your program is you'll add a crate, right? And one we'll see, I believe we'll see this in the guessing game, is this rand crate. And I'm just going to make up a number here. I don't know what the actual version is we will use, but that is essentially how you bring up dependencies and add them to your application. So now that this is here, when I run cargo, either cargo run or cargo build, it's going to see that I have a dependency here. It's going to go to the crate server, which is similar to the website we have posted. And it will look for this package and build it into my program and make sure that I've downloaded the code so the compiler will have it when it goes to build my program. Again, we're not going to do that right now. I just wanted to give you an idea what that looks like. You'll have many more opportunities to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of this unless there's any other questions about what we see here in the cargo.toml file. Please don't be shy to ask questions. Okay. Great. All right, so let's quit out of here. Let's clear the screen, get our real estate back. And yeah, so let's now talk about how we use cargo in other ways, right? We learned about using cargo to create our application. Now we want to talk about how does it replace Rust C that we saw at the beginning of the stream, or the Rust compiler. Well, it doesn't really replace Rust C, right? What it actually does is it runs some scripts that will use Rust C. So when we have this application that is multiple files in Rust, right now we have this cargo.toml file that cargo needs to be aware of. We have this source directory with this main.rs file, and the compiler, essentially it's only going to compile Rust. It's not actually going to compile cargo.toml, but cargo will use that cargo.toml file for information for helping the build process that Rust compiler uses. So if we have one of those dependencies like we talked about in the cargo.toml file, cargo, the application, will look in that file and it'll say, okay, here's a dependency for rand. Before this compiler goes, I need to make sure that we've downloaded the rand crate and that code is available because this Rust program is going to use some of that code. So how do we do that, right? So remember we talked about how, well, the way we do that is we use there's two different commands we can do that. One is cargo build and one is cargo run. Remember we talked about Rust is when it runs, it's a two-stage process. There's the build process and then there's the run process. If I run, so let me just go back to the root directory of the application. You'll see here I'm in the main directory or root directory of this application. If I run cargo build, all it is going to do, excuse me, it's going to do the same things about compiling, right? It's going to look that we talked about. It's going to look in the cargo.toml file, get whatever information it needs. It's going to invoke Rust compiler and make sure it runs against the file or multiple files in the source directory. In our case, it's only one main.rs file, but if there's multiple files there, it would handle all those. And then it's just going to build us an executable file and some other stuff that we're not going to go into today, but we'll see that. Now, if I were to just run cargo run right now, just remember, if I were to run cargo run right now, it would actually do that two-stage process with one command. It would do all that build process we talked about, and then it would also run the executable application for us. So let's just have, as an example, I'm going to run cargo build so you can see what actually happens. So just remember right now, if you're looking at the lineup from my cursor, we have a cargo.toml file and we have a source folder. And then we know within that source folder is main.rs. So we're going to run cargo build, and we're not going to see any, like, we're not going to see the hello world output we'd expect from our application, because this is not actually going to run the application. What's it doing? It's compiling. Okay, so let's look at this, right? It compiled GROM game. Well, we know it got that name from, one, the command I put in when I told Cargo to create me a new application, and two, uh, where it says, remember when we looked in the cargo.toml file, it said, I think it says package, and then it said name, I believe, GROM game, right? And then look at this, v0.1.0. That's also in that cargo.toml file. Let me just open that up so we can look at it again. Yeah, see, name, GROM game, version 0. Now let's just do something just so we know I'm not a liar. We're going to change that version number to 0.2.0, okay? And now we're going to run cargo build again. Look at that. Version 0.2.0. That's because it's getting it from that cargo.toml file when we run cargo build. So just a quick thing on version numbers. What you put here for now is inconsequential. In the future, as you build, real applications and libraries that other people will use, you'll need to make sure you keep that. You have a system for your version numbers. But just know if you change that when you're following along and it's some weird number, don't worry about it for now. It's not going to be a big deal. Yeah, so we now have a compiled, it has compiled our game. Let's see what other information it gave us. So it says finished dev. What does that mean? We'll talk about that. We have his other information, unoptimized plus debug info, target in 1.29 seconds. So what this means here, so this is just finished. That just means the compilation process is finished. Dev means like developer version. And what does that mean practically? In here, it's speaking to what the developer version means. It means it's unoptimized and it has debug info. So as you write more Rust applications and the more complex they get, the compilation process is going to take longer. And your developer version is going to need information, or excuse me, you'll need the developer version as you're creating your program and editing it, because you want to be able to easily see what's going wrong. And so this compilation process, it targets the dev version, is a way to say it. There is another version that you'll see once you're like, let's say you've worked on your application, if you're ready to like get it out in the world and have people download it and use it, not just other developers, you'll do what's called a release version. And now what, from my understanding, what you'll see there with more complex applications is a compilation process will actually take longer. And the reason it will take longer is because the Rust compiler will be working to ensure that executable is as performant as possible, and it won't include this debug info that we as developers want while we're working on our application. And this just gives you this time just gives you kind of a benchmark of how long it took. If you notice, the first time we ran this was at 3.1 seconds, and the second time was 1.29 seconds. That's because we didn't change much, and the Rust compiler was able to recognize, well, the only thing that really changed was the cargo.toml file, so it was able to reuse a lot of the work it had here, so this was faster. I wouldn't worry too much about the speeds you see here. It's going to vary. Whatever you see here is going to vary depending on your computer and how complex your program is, and if you're bringing how much other code you're bringing in from crates. But if this becomes important to you at some point, it's there for you. All right. So now that we've created, or excuse me, we've built our program using Cargo, I'm not going to run cargo run yet. I want to go look at our, let me just clear this back up. I want to look at our folder. And we got some more information here. We have cargo.lock. Remember, we only used to have this right here. Cargo.toml and the source folder. And now since then we've added this cargo.lock file and we have this target folder. This cargo.lock is, again, if you're familiar with npm, you'll see a package lock JSON file. It's very similar. It's just holding down some like version information. I'm not going to go into deep into it today because I think it's a little out of scope for what we're trying to learn here. And then we have this target folder. Now remember when I was talking about dev version, right? That's going to be kind of, well, one, this is where our executable file is. It's in this target folder. This we're not going to worry about. Honestly, I'd have to go look to see what that is. I don't know what it is yet. But we're going to go in this debug folder, and then we have a lot of other directories, right? We have this incremental directory, we have this example directory, deps, build. Let's not worry about any of this right now, okay? Like there's plenty more important things for us to focus on, but just know that all this information is important to either one, for you to be able to continue to work on your program when the time comes, or for you to release your program. But what we do want to focus on here is this GROM game executable. If you're working on Windows, you'll see and you've run a cargo build, you'll see a GROM game.exe. But this is our executable file. This is our game. So remember, since we ran cargo build, it compiled everything, but it didn't actually run it. So one way we can do it is just to run it manually, right? We can just, and the way you do that in this Linux or Mac OS environment is to do this ./, which just indicates that you're in the same folder that you're in, or that you want to run that application in the folder that you're currently in, and GROM game and hello world. And notice another thing, if you watch our last video, when we were using when we used cargo towards the end, I think we used cargo run, and it compiled everything and then it ran. This time it just ran the program because that's all we're doing. Cargo is not involved in anything that I just did right now. When I just typed this GROM game, that's not cargo. Okay, cargo was only at the build process. So that's it. Like now we have this application, and we actually didn't even write any code, right? We used cargo new GROM game, and cargo actually did everything for us. And then we ran cargo build, and it compiled the program. And then we came into this directory and we ran GROM game. Now I'll just give you a little command line tips in case you're new to the command line. So right now I'm in the GROM game root directory. If I don't want to like change directory down into that tree or into those subdirectories, I can do this. And then on the command line, if you just press target, if you press tab, you type a few keys and press tab, the computer will try to guess which folder you're looking at. And so all I've done now is said run GROM game executable that's in the debug folder, which is in the target folder, which is in the folder that I'm in. Okay. And now, so it just ran again, and that command is no different than what I ran earlier. Okay. Let me hide this. We don't need this. So great. We've now used cargo to build our application, and then we ran it with a separate command. But we talked about cargo making this easier for us, right? Well, it can, right? We can do it in one step. But before we do that, I want to make a quick change to our Rust program, just so we can just so we make sure that cargo will compile, right? Because if I just try to build again um, with the same program, nothing's going to change, right? So now I'm going to run cargo run instead of cargo build. If I were to run cargo build, it would just compile and nothing would happen. No, we wouldn't get any output. We wouldn't see our hello Twitch. But now I'm going to cargo run, and it should do the build and run for us. There, good. See, so basically, we have 2 steps in one, right? Again, like this is not a big deal, right? If we had to run cargo build or Rusty main.rs and then run our application after it's built, that's not a big deal. But as we go forward and bring in crates and we have multiple Rust files, we don't want to be messing with compiling all that stuff together manually. Cargo is going to do that for us. And this is just the beginning of it. Give me just a moment here, please. Okay. So, any questions on what we've looked at so far? Any questions from the chat? No? Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look at the Rust book together. Let me change my screen. So kind of what I like to do is kind of go through this my own way, right? And then we'll go through the chapter together to see if there's anything important that I missed. Yeah, so this cargo version is actually a good command to run. If you run this and you get an error, that means your Rust installation isn't working. But if you run it, and you should get a version number, okay? And so they talk about what we did. We ran cargo new GROM game, and then you just change directory into it. So another thing that cargo did for us that we didn't see was that it created a Git repository for us. We're not going to go into Git. I'll have to at some point do a video on Git and how you use that. I suppose there's plenty of videos available, so maybe not. Maybe I won't make a video, but if you have questions about Git, we actually have somebody with a Git problem going on our Discord right now. We're trying to help, so come ask. I'm not a Git expert. Git's a very huge big tool that you're not going to master. You just use what you need as you're going along. But this cargo doing this for us is just saves us a step when we're setting up our application. Setting up our application. Yeah, Git is the most common these days. And I don't really know anybody that's not using Git that's running in new applications. But if you use something else, version control and you know what you're doing. Yeah. So this just talks about the file name the file that we talked about, cargo.toml. It goes in depth about kind of what this meant. Tom's obvious minimal language. I was close. I called it Tom's obvious markup language. And so all that means is this is, just to be clear, this is not Rust, right? It's a file that's included in our Rust project, but it's not a Rust syntax. It's this Tom's obvious minimal language. And it's a configuration format. All right. So yeah, this is all pretty straightforward. When you're, this is something important to know. When you're writing your Rust program, make sure whatever Rust you have is in the source directory. That way the compiler and cargo knows where to look for it. Yeah, this is all stuff we've already gone over. I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. If you see anything in the book on this section that I haven't gone over, please speak up. You know, it talks about the difference between cargo build and cargo run. We know that. So cargo check is another option. Um, okay, this is a good. This is something good to talk about. I'm not actually going to run this just because you can kind of see what happens with it here in the book. Um, Cargo, like we talked about earlier. There's a lot of things you can do with cargo. You know, eventually you'll have tests, and you'll in your code, and you'll use cargo to run those tests. Um, but here it's saying you can run cargo check, and what this does is it builds your program, but it does not uh, create an executable. So why would you do that? Well, again, once these Rust programs become more complex, the compilation process can take a longer time. You'll actually see that's something that people complain about with Rust is the compilation times are long. That's not going to be a problem for us with our new simple our small simple applications. But over time, you may start to feel that pain. So instead of running cargo build, which produces the executable, you can run cargo check. And so theoretically, I don't have any practice with this. Theoretically, what will happen will be faster. So it'll still check your application and all your code and make sure that it can build properly without any errors that would stop the compiler, but it won't actually output the executable file, which makes it a faster process. Okay. Again, any questions come up? It looks like we're gonna have plenty of time today. So if you have some questions you're sitting on, feel free to bring them up. Right. So we talked about this too. Um, so remember when we looked at? I'm going to scroll up so we can take a look at it. Yeah. Remember when we build or even run here, we get this finished dev, right? Well, we may not always want the developer version, like we said. Sometimes we want to release a version so our users get the best, fastest version of our application. Excuse me. We would run cargo build release, and it'll put it in a different directory. When we looked in, it said target debug. This will be target release. Okay. That's not something you have to worry about right now, but just, store that in your brain as something to remember in the future. Okay. Yeah. And so, we talked about this, right? Cargo doesn't provide a lot of value over just using Rust C. But as your programs become more intricate, it'll have more value. Okay. All right. So we spent some time on the command line. All right. I know that you may or may not be comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable, don't shy away from it. We need to learn it. Okay. Join the GROM's Discord. I have some. Let me just show that message here. Oh, that's not very helpful. I'll just get you that link here just a second and repost it. In the GROM's Discord, you can actually the best way. Here's the best thing to do. Go to groms.club and you'll find our Twitter links and our Discord links. Okay. In our Discord, we have the Beginner Geek Curriculum channel that has information both on Git and on command line. Okay. Command line is also a big topic. If you're not familiar with it, you just need to kind of learn what you need to learn. You don't need to learn at all. But it's going to be important. If you want to be a Rust developer, you need to learn the command line. I don't think that there's a way around it. I guess, I don't know. I know maybe you can run. I've never done this before, but I'm aware that Microsoft is working on Rust, and maybe you can run everything in Visual Studio without using command line. But I don't have experience with that. And in general, I think most of the Rust development is going to happen within a Linux environment or Mac OS environment. So, but you can learn this, right? It's not undoable. You just need to learn. Probably better off running Linux VM. I completely agree with you, Dust of Blast, and welcome. I completely agree with you. If you're on a Windows machine, I would strongly recommend running Windows subsystem for Linux. And I have a link to the Microsoft site in the GROM's Discord as well. If you join up, you can find that information. Yeah, I would highly recommend that. But I understand people want to stick to what they know sometimes. Yeah. So that's it. Unless we have questions, just remember this stuff takes time. It takes focus. If you're a new programmer, you're jumping the deep end, but I think in the end you'll be a good programmer as long as you stay focused, as long as you work on this every day, right? As much as you can, with as few missed days as possible. Work on this every day. Watch these videos. Come to the Groms Club Discord. Google, search for more videos. You can definitely do it. It's going to feel tough at times, but just believe in yourself and stay focused, and you'll get there. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. This will be posted on YouTube likely sometime tomorrow. Yeah. Have a good day, GM, GN, GA, and come check out Groms and Minute Grom if you haven't. Talk soon.